Hello, everyone. A year or so ago, I did some readings which became audiobooks for October for Spooky Ventures, and I decided I was going to do the same thing this year for 3 weeks. So, what I'm going to read from are the very three first books that I released with Tales of Wonder and Dread. The first one here is Lifeblood, which is a collection of vampire stories, some by me, some not. And I'm going to read a story called The Close Call, and this is, in honor of October, Halloween month. So, here we go. This is The Close Call. My name is Black, Adrian Black. I'm a private investigator, have been for ages. Most of my jobs are easy ones. Follow around the husband or find the missing cash, that kind of thing. Most of them pay all right. Occasionally things get hairy. Occasionally I take a case for something other than money. Let me tell you about my latest case. It was one that I took on for free. It was also a very close call. It was a Tuesday. I'd been out late the night before, and it was dusk by the time I was awakened by a knock on the door. As I was rising, the knock became more insistent. I flew to the door and threw it open. There she stood, tall and beautiful. She looked a bit like a supermodel and smelled delicious. It became apparent quite quickly that as gorgeous as she was every bit that tough too. She introduced herself as Detective Monica Jones. It seems that while I was hoping for it to be a social call, she was here on business. My card had been discovered on a corpse, and she wanted to know what I knew. I found out that the deceased had a name, Leslie Duncan. I knew her. She had called me a couple days earlier to hire me. It seemed someone was stalking her. The police hadn't been of any help in locating him, the stalker, so she decided to hire a gumshoe. I met with her to discuss the case. I told the cop all of that. I also told her that Duncan was a bit short in the cash department, so she wasn't able to even make my retainer. So that meant that our business had been over. I told her that that was the end of the meeting. The detective seemed quite interested. According to her, Duncan was only one in a series of ladies turning up dead under what she called unusual circumstances. When I asked what she meant by that, I saw her eyes turn cold and the somewhat friendly tone disappear. I can't tell you that. It is information critical to an ongoing investigation, was what she said. I thought about laying on my charm to get her to tell me what she knew, but thought that it was really of no concern. Little did I know just how much of my concern it really was. Before she left, she gave me her card and told me to call her if I thought of anything that I would like to add. I hung on to it, thinking that I might call her out on a dinner date one night. She was my kind of lady. The rest of the evening was rather uneventful. I checked my messages and grabbed a bite. I hadn't had a paying case in a while, but I would survive. I always had. Besides, over the years, I had put money away for the proverbial rainy day. On Wednesday, the detective was back. This time she brought friends, and they didn't look nearly as nice as her. Seems my card had shown up when they were searching the apartment of another late lady. So Detective Jones and these other clowns were here tonight. The three men gave me their names, but I thought of them as Larry, Moe, and Curly. I had always thought cops were a big joke anyway. I found out from talking with them that the other body belonged to Kay Walker. I told him that I hadn't met her, but I knew the name. She was a friend of the other woman. According to Duncan, Walker was the person who gave her my card. The cops were obviously not too happy with that answer, and they pressed on with pumping me for information. They asked things like, "Why do you meet your clients at night?" I explained that when you do surveillance on cheating spouses and the like, a lot of your work is late, after the typical 9 to 5 working shift. You just sort of get into the habit and become a creature of the night. It was obvious they still had some issues with me, but there wasn't much more that they could do at the moment. They certainly were well short of enough info to get a warrant. After they left, it was obvious to me that I now had a case. It wasn't one of the paying variety, but it was a case. These cops were starting to suspect me, so I'd have to help them find the person to charge with the crimes. The most obvious person seemed to be Duncan's stalker. I guess I could have found out more about him while he was still alive, while she was still alive, but it's never too late. I took out to the streets under the full moon. It was a great night for hunting, and I was going to make the best of it. My first stop had to be the cop shop. Certainly finding out what they knew would be a good idea. This time of night the place was nearly deserted, only a desk sergeant standing watch. I went right past him without being seen. That was a skill I had acquired a long time ago. I found my way to the homicide office and located Detective Jones' desk. The picture of her with two older ladies had been my clue. My guess is that they were her mother and grandmother. Looking through her files, I found the case. The cops were calling these murders the vampire killings, having borrowed it from the media. The coroner reports showed all the bodies, and there was a long string of them were completely drained of blood. Looking further through the file, I saw notes that indicated that I was, indeed, high on their list of suspects, just on the strength of the two cards that were discovered. Good thing I decided to look into this then. Certainly wouldn't be good to have them show up with a warrant. I found that the stalker was also someone with whom they had spoken. He was my company toward the top of the list. Seems that when Duncan had called for the cops to find her stalker, they basically put the request into a file and forgot about it. Once she turned up dead, they wanted to know more. The phone company had his name, address, and number, and now so did I. I would need to pay a visit to Mr. Jason Tander. I heard the sounds of someone coming up the stairs, so I slipped out the window and down to the street. My next stop was Tander's apartment. When I got there, the Stooges were with him. I stayed hidden and listened. Obviously, Tander's story wasn't pleasing them much more than mine had. He didn't even try to deny stalking Duncan, but he said he didn't know any of the other women. He also said he definitely didn't kill anyone. After they left, I just sat and watched for a while, working out a strategy. I would do it tomorrow night. For tonight, my agenda would consist of a quick bite, picking up a few supplies, and getting my plan in line. I awoke the next night just after sunset. The detectives had not been by that evening. That was a good thing. I gathered the supplies I had gotten the night before and made my way to Tander's place. Glancing through the window, I saw that he was home, perusing a supply of girly magazines. I came in through the window. He was definitely surprised to see me. He tried to fight with me at first, but I won him over with my charming demeanor. I had him make the call to Detective Jones. He told her that he was ready to talk, but only if she came alone. She made it there within half an hour. She was alone, at least in one way. As she got out of the car, I noticed that she did have a tail. Well, actually three. Howard Fine and Howard had followed in an unmarked sedan. Listening to them for a moment, it was obvious that Jones wasn't wired. That was good because it might have spoiled the operation. When Jones knocked, Tander let her in. I was hiding in the shadows. He wasn't much of a conversationalist at the moment, so I came out as he locked the door. Figuring that she had been set up, Jones pulled her pistol. That wouldn't do. I couldn't have the Stooges in there when they heard a gunshot. I flew across the room and knocked it from her hand. I had Tander grab her and hold her, covering her mouth. She would listen quietly now. She didn't look too pleased with her situation and was struggling pretty hard. I could smell the fear. That was always one of my favorite parts of the hunt. Some of my kind simply feed. The older ones, like myself, develop a style. It becomes a far more sensual experience. The funny thing about this one was she was spunky. Even though her scent told me that she was terrified, she still had the look of curiosity in those beautiful eyes. Someone like that deserved her answers, even if that would be the last thing she would ever hear. I began to get my supplies arranged and filled her in. You see, Detective Jones, my kind is nearly as old as yours. We came from you. Various alchemists and magicians were working in Sparta to create the perfect human, and wound up with us. We've been known by many names in your legends through the ages. You yourself used one of them as in your files, vampire. It seemed that you and your friends might be getting close to connecting this string of killings to me, and I just couldn't have that. It would make it too hard for me to travel, so I needed a way to tie things up neatly before I go. By this time I had removed the supplies from my bag. The vials of blood didn't seem to faze her much, but when she spotted the 2 ice picks, she began to struggle much harder. Don't waste your energy, Monica. While Tander is under my control, his strength is augmented by mine. There is no way you can break free. As I pulled the cell phone that I had taken from last night's feast, I continued with my explanation. The way this is going to work is like this. First, I will dine on you. I've wanted you since I first met you, so that is an added bonus. Normally I love puncturing the throat with my fangs as nature had intended. I had really longed for that with you. However, we need an explanation for how Tander here could have done the deed. So that is what those ice picks are for. I held them between my fingers in the proper configuration to demonstrate. I will use those to bleed you. That way, they will be covered with your blood. Then, after my meal, I will cover the area in Tander with blood that I borrowed from the blood bank last night. I will leave you lying in his arms with the ice picks in his hand. Then I will call your detective friends outside and report witnessing a struggle in this apartment. As they throw open the door, I will release my hold on Tander, and your friends will shoot him. Case closed. Now, I hate to be rude, but it's dinner time and I'm famished. The operation went exactly as planned, and I slipped out unnoticed. I even wound up having the time that night to move to another city, sending for my belongings later. That was really one of the closest calls I've ever had, though. Anyway, I've just recently written a couple other stories with that same character, or at least one other story with that same character, no, two, with that same character showing up. So I hope you enjoyed The Close Call. It's in Lifeblood, which you can pick up at lulu.com/spotlight/strange sound. And I'll see you next week with another audiobook. Spooky Ventures is the home for spooky content and spooky merchandise on the web. Check it out today at spookyventures.com. And remember, always keep it spooky.